The Vietnam War was a conflict that lasted from 1955 to 1975, and was fought between the Communist government of North Vietnam and the government of South Vietnam, which was supported by the United States and other anti-communist nations. The conflict began as a result of the growing divide between the Communist North and the non-Communist South. In the aftermath of World War II, the Communist Viet Minh, led by Ho Chi Minh, declared independence from France and established a communist government in the north. Meanwhile, the non-communist South was established as a republic, with support from the United States. The initial conflict began as a series of low-level guerrilla attacks by the Viet Cong, a communist insurgency group in the South, against the South Vietnamese government. The United States, concerned about the spread of communism in Asia, gradually increased its involvement in the conflict. In 1964, 2 U.S. destroyers were reportedly attacked by North Vietnamese naval vessels in the Gulf of Tonkin. This incident led to the U.S. Congress passing the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which authorized the U.S. to take military action in Vietnam. The U.S. escalated its involvement, sending hundreds of thousands of troops to fight in the conflict. The war in Vietnam was marked by a series of brutal and bloody battles, with both sides suffering heavy losses. Despite their superior military technology, the US and its allies were unable to defeat the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces, who fought fiercely and made use of the dense jungles and mountainous terrain to their advantage. The war in Vietnam also had a significant impact on the United States. The conflict divided the nation, with many Americans protesting against the war and calling for an end to US involvement. The protests grew more intense as the conflict wore on and the casualties mounted, with many Americans calling the war a quagmire and a lost cause. In 1972, the US and North Vietnam agreed to a ceasefire, but the fighting continued. Finally, in 1975, the North Vietnamese launched a major offensive and captured Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam. The war in Vietnam officially ended with the fall of Saigon, and the Communist North and the non-Communist South were unified as the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. The conflict in Vietnam had a profound impact on the world. It marked the end of the US's post-World War II dominance and dealt a serious blow to US prestige. The war also had a significant impact on the country of Vietnam, which was left in ruins and faced years of rebuilding and recovery. Despite its brutal and bloody nature, the war in Vietnam remains an important part of world history, serving as a reminder of the horrors of war and the importance of seeking peace and understanding between nations. In the aftermath of the war, Vietnam struggled to rebuild and recover. The country was left in ruins, with cities and villages destroyed, and millions of people displaced. The country also faced food shortages, inflation, and a struggling economy. The government of the newly formed Socialist Republic of Vietnam began a program of reconstruction and rehabilitation, but progress was slow and the country faced many challenges. One of the biggest challenges was the legacy of the conflict. Millions of people in Vietnam were affected by the war, including soldiers and civilians who had been wounded or killed. Many others suffered from the effects of Agent Orange, a toxic herbicide used by US forces during the war that had devastating health and environmental consequences. The US also struggled with the aftermath of the war. Many soldiers who had served in Vietnam suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and other mental health issues, and struggled to readjust to civilian life. The country was also divided by the conflict, with many Americans still deeply divided over the war and its legacy. Despite these challenges, Vietnam and the United States have made progress in overcoming the legacy of the war. In recent years, the two countries have worked to normalize relations, with US President Barack Obama becoming the first US president to visit Vietnam since the end of the war in 2016. The two countries have also worked together on a range of issues, including trade, health, and environmental protection. In conclusion, the Vietnam War was a devastating conflict that had a profound impact on the world. It serves as a reminder of the horrors of war and the importance of seeking peace and understanding between nations. Despite the challenges that remain, both Vietnam and the United States have made progress in overcoming the legacy of the war and working towards a better future.